Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Austin Jenkins, the current facility engineer and a instructor at the virtual Kansas City Art Tech on VATSIM. And today we're getting into our new strip marking policy that has just been developed and is going to be pushed to the website at the same time that this video is available to you guys. The strip marking policy was a project assigned to me by our air traffic manager, Austin Wilkins, and the rest of the senior staff um, to be developed as a means to standardize strip marking within ZKC for all airports and covers certain procedures that are generally important to working positions, whether it be local control, some terminal radar, or um, really anything of that matter. Now, starting off in the table of contents, we're going to go to chapter 1, which is our general strip marking page. So what this is going to cover is most of our approved contractions for use in strip marking, as well as just some other general information. So contractions are going to be things like CFR, call for release, full route clearances, or FRC, or stuff that is shortened to fit inside of the block. So that's fairly easy to look through. Chapter 2 is going to be IFR strip marking. So this is going to contain details about the flight strips that you're going to be marking for IFR aircraft, what blocks contain different information, and what you'll be putting in them. So let's go and talk about an IFR departure strip here. We'll come over to V strips and let's go and grab the strip for Southwest 384. So starting off the bat is shown up here. Blocks 1 through 4 are filled in by the computer here. So block 1, South 384, the call sign. Block 2 is unoccupied here because there is no revision number. I'll go and show you guys what that looks like. That's what happens when something is modified on the original aircraft's flight plan. In this case, we'll change the cruising altitude, and that'll print a new strip for Southwest 384. You'll see that little number there above the aircraft type. That is the aircraft's strip revision number. So that's field 2 of the flight strip. And then field 3 here, you'll see your CID or computer identification number, which can be used for certain commands and stars. And ERAM, although ERAM's not going to be using paper strips on the network. Moving into the next few blocks, this is blocks 5, 6, and 7. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Block 5 is always going to have the aircraft squawk code. Block 6 is going to be the aircraft's either proposed departure time or their estimated arrival time at the airport, which in real world, for arrival strips, I'll talk more about that, and I believe it'll show up on the VATSIM strips as well. And then block 6, or 7 rather, is the aircraft's cruising altitude for departure strips. Block 8 is going to contain the departure and destination airport. And then block 9 is going to contain your route, destination field, and block 9A is going to contain any remarks the aircraft has filed. What you're going to be annotating for IFR departure strips is going to be these 9 boxes over here on the right, blocks 10 through 18. So let's go and say Southwest 384 has called us up for a clearance here. If he was just, flying that original flight plan, we would use shift and slash, or in a regular keyboard input the question mark to denote a check mark in that box to display that he has been cleared um, or has been delivered an IFR clearance. And that will be done whether you do the clearance verbally or via use of TETLs. Moving into box 12, this is usually the second thing you will enter into the strip. That's going to be that top right box there. That's going to be the current ATIS code, or at an airport without ATIS, WX, to denote the receiving of weather information, whether it be via ASOS or controller input. The third block you usually fill out is going to be block number 10, which is that top left box, and that's the aircraft's assigned runway. We'll say this guy here is going to get assigned runway 1 right for departure. So you'll put that in like so. Moving on, box 11, which is immediately to the right of box 10, is going to be a non-standard intersection if they're flying an intersection departure, which in this case we'll say this guy isn't. And generally, this is the most you'll need to mark for a standard strip. Most of the time, you're not going to have to put in anything else. We'll say Southwest 384 up here is going through the ringer. Whenever you initially get this strip, let's say you need to change something in the route, you'll print out the new strip, which will have the revision number on it, and you'll put in FRC. This will denote that the aircraft either requires a new routing or has a new routing with that revision number and requires a full route clearance. So once you give Southwest 384 that full route clearance, you'll throw that check mark up in there. We'll say he's received the weather, he's ready to taxi, signed runway 1 right, but he wants an intersection departure. In this case, that's when you'll throw the aircraft's departure intersection into that block to the right of the runway. We'll say he's going to take Echo 3 here. So now that's filled out. But on the taxi out, unfortunately, he's gotten hit with a release time. We'll say there's flow in place to Denver. That'll go in that center box. If Denver's under ground stop, you'd put GS. If they just have ground delay programs and they're implementing edict times, you'll put in ECT, which is short for edict, estimated departure clearance time. And we'll say right now the current time, well, we'll just put it as 000. So let's say he's departing at 0030. That's when his time was assigned. You'll put in 30 because it's within the same hour, so you can shorten it to just the minutes. If the aircraft's departure time is going to be out of the proposed hour or the current hour, you'll shorten to 3 digits, 1 hour, and then 2 digits for a minute. So in this case, he would be departing at 0115. So generally, that's about the max that you'll have to deal with here. That's basically a fully marked strip. There's not much else you can change on that. Whenever it comes to sequencing, let's go ahead and say here Southwest 1064 or 1061 and Southwest 384 rather are going to be taxiing out at the same time. Southwest 384 is first, so you should have a strip first in the runway 1 right line. First is going to be at the bottom of your list. So whenever you get Southwest 34 on the outbound taxiway, ship them to tower, you'll dump that strip. And then once Southwest 1061's ready, and on that outbound, you'll drag him to tower, and they'll show up in that list in the same order that you dropped them in. Whenever you're working local control, and procedures are mentioned for this in IFR strip handling. Clearance delivery must fill out box 14, 16, and 17 if applicable, and, upon completion of flight strip preparation, clearance delivery should forward the aircraft strip to ground control. Whenever you're working clearance delivery and you're forwarding a strip to ground, it doesn't have to be in any particular order, because they'll sort into the list and they'll be considered proposals. Generally, best practice if you're at an airport with an uncontrolled terminal ramp is to send the strips to ground in the order that they've been cleared and annotated. That way, it's kind of in a decent order, and ground can know when to, or about where the strip's going to be in their proposal list. Moving into ground control, typically ground is going to be marking clearance times if they get one, or if TME requires a reroute, they can be stopped and sent back to clearance and given a full route clearance as applicable. There's many different marking scenarios for ground control, too many to put in the ground control procedures list. So most of the time, whenever something happens and you need to annotate something, use your best judgment and follow the guidelines above, depending on the situation. Ground control is very simple. Departure strips must just be pushed to the appropriate local bay, as discussed before. And ground control must ensure that appropriate strip markings are updated and uh, correlate with what an aircraft's going to be doing prior to forwarding the strip to local control. Because remember, if your strip's out of date and it's sent to tower and the aircraft's assigned something different than what's on the strip, that creates confusion and can cause an issue if not properly coordinated. Local control is has even less to do. Basically, just make sure your strips are all in the correct order that aircraft are going to be departing from their assigned departure runway. That's generally very easy, because you'll be receiving strips in that order from ground. If you do need to do some resequencing, just make sure you put your strips where they need to go. That way, when you get relieved, the controller, assuming the position, can preview and know where everything is prior to receiving their verbal briefing. Let's go and talk a little bit about arrival strips here. So arrival strips typically are going to be fairly unused at Gateway Tracon and other large Tracons that um, work a lot of traffic, as most things can be coordinated via scratch pads. In terms of approach control, at most up-down facilities, you'll want to do some strip marking for arrivals. 697 Yankee Yankee. So we'll go and print this guy out here. So arrival strips are going to show up very similarly to departure strips with some key differences. The 4 fields on the left side of the strip remain exactly the same. And these 3 boxes here, box 5, will always be the squawk code no matter what type of strip. Box 7 has a difference on the arrival strip. That's the destination airport. And then field 8 will have the estimated arrival time. In real world, most of the time, it's going to be the arrival time over a coordination fix. But for our cases, block 8 will be the arrival time for arrivals. Arrival strip marking is heavily simplified for our purposes from real world, because there are a lot of strip marking blocks in the real world that they can annotate in that we are limited to by V-strips. So for our cases, box 10 for arrival strips in the Tracon will include the current ATIS code. Blocks 13 and 14 will be the approach type and runway. So we'll say this guy's taking the ILS approach to runway 1 left. Or if he wants a visual, you can do VIS. And then block 16 is going to be now your approach clearance indicator. Putting the check mark there indicates that the aircraft is clear for the approach. And whenever you ship that aircraft to tower, I would advise holding onto the strip in case of a go around. But if you want to, you can always just spin the strip, and if they come back up, print out a new one and fill the information in again. Now we're moving into VFR strips. This is probably the most in-depth procedures that we'll use at Kansas City because VFR aircraft are generally less standardized, which means that they are going to have a lot more dynamic use cases. Let's go ahead and start with stars data entries. That's a very big part of VFR strip marking. The use cases for stars data entries is aircraft flight plans, VFR flight plans specifically, either getting flight following off the ground at an airport, or in a Class Charlie or Class Bravo's case, the aircraft is going to be exiting the surface area, or in some cases remaining within. So for this, let's go and migrate over to our stars window. Let me make sure my text size is readable. Go and bump it up a little bit there. All right, put my preview area out here. So there are two different types of stars data entries for VFR aircraft. There is the NAS flight plan, which is going to be flight following from an airport to another airport, and then the local flight plan, which is going to be something that's remaining within your airspace or is going to be doing some sort of operation where they're just leaving a surface area and they aren't going to require any outside radio or outside radar service outside of your facility. Let's go and get an aircraft ready to go here so we can have a good example of this. So for example, November 189 Mike X-ray here at Wichita, he wants to depart with flight following, let's say from Wichita to Colonel James Jabara. So I'll call up Wichita ground, Skyhawk 189 Mike X-ray is on the ground at the East FBO, request flight following to Jabara. So in this case, we'll say 189 Mike X-ray Roger. So I'll start by typing in the aircraft call sign in stars. That's the way we start every VFR data entry or other command. So, whoops. So 189 Mike X-ray, he's a aircraft. He's going to be going from Wichita, so the departure airport, to the destination airport. Colonel James Jabara, he'll use the 3 letters, then Cessna 172. If you don't include the aircraft equipment, it'll default to slant alpha. We'll say slant golf in this case, and on course, we'll just assign him an altitude of 2,000 or 2,500. So you'll type enter, and notice here the strip print there. So initially, whenever you complete that flight plan, you'll see the aircraft's call sign pop up and the data you entered as well as the squawk code. So you can assign that squawk code, and we'll go ahead and move over to the strip window again. And you'll see that 189 Mike X-ray now has a new VFR strip printed for him. The strip marking process for a VFR strip flight following is very similar with some minor differences. In this case, we know 189 Mike X-ray. He's going to be, departing VFR. So we went ahead and made a strip for him. So box 16, just like IFR aircraft, you're going to throw a check mark in there whenever you've given him his departure information. Box 12, much like the IFR strip, is also going to contain the aircraft's obtained weather. And box 10 will once again be the assigned departure runway. Moving back into the policy here, box 11 is going to be the same thing, the departure intersection if other than full length, like the IFR strip. However, box 13 now is a difference and will be used. Box 13 is between 10 and 16, so between that check mark and your departure runway. And this you can leave blank for flight following aircraft that have a destination, or you can put in like initial departure information, like an assigned heading or an SOP heading, just as a quick reference, or you can just leave it blank. We'll get into box 13 in a little more detail here shortly. Now let's talk about November 856 Kilo Sierra. That aircraft is the other type of aircraft we're going to talk about. So he's an SR-22, and we'll say he wants to do pattern work at Wichita. Now, you could let him run without a squawk since you're talking to him, and you'll have at least a paper half strip for him. Well, we'll say in this case he just wants to depart the surface area to the west, and you're going to need to generate a code for him. All right, so 856 Kilo Sierra. Now, instead of a departure and a destination ID, we're going to put in a primary or secondary scratch pad. And to do that, we will type the delta key using the tilde or slash key, or tilde or backtick key on a standard keyboard, and we'll type west. So in this case, he's going to be departing to the west. And if he's not going to have any other important stuff that we need to know about, that's all we have to do. If we have another scratch pad, say we want to inform approach that he wants the ILS practice approach to one left, we can put IL as an approach assignment. Although actually, that's better off in primary plus west. So he's westbound, but when he comes back, he wants the ILS practice approach one left. And then we can assign him an altitude here. And I messed up and accidentally created a flight plan, so that's not going to work. I'll try it with 121 Bravo Sierra. 121 Bravo Sierra. IL West 025. And that will spit out a squawk code. It won't include a route because it's a local flight plan where the information is coordinated via scratch pads. So that's what we'll get into here. 121 Bravo Sierra, you can assign him that squawk code. But in this case, since he's going to be departing the surface area, you're going to want to I totally forgot to put in his aircraft type, but he's a Cessna 182. So you can modify that using the flight plan template, and you'll want to modify in the departure airport. That way, you'll get a strip to print out. And in this case, I'm going to go back over to the strip window. Where is it? There it is. All right. So in this case, we get a strip. It just says Wichita and it's got nothing else on it. So this is a time where we want to put in the aircraft's intentions in that block 13, just so we know what they're doing. And now let's get into pattern work aircraft. So pattern work and other general, within surface area operations for VFR aircraft, we're going to want to use half strips for those. These will also be used for non-flight following aircraft, but can also be used for aircraft inside of Charlie or Bravo airspace. You can assign them a code, and instead of putting in a destination or a departure, you can make a paper half strip. That way, they'll have a strip for radar or a code for radar purposes, but they can be tracked easier using a half strip. So the way we teach half strips here is in 3 lines, lines 1, 2, and 3. Line 1 is going to include the call sign, aircraft type, and current operation or direction of flight if they're leaving a delta without flight following, and then their squawk code if applicable. And you can use the tab key to move your cursor further right if you require that. Line 2 is going to be your runway assignments and tracking of operations. And line 3 is going to be miscellaneous information. Should there be something non-standard happening that you feel should be coordinated, but is not required to be coordinated. So I'll go and show an example of that here. November 123 Alpha Bravo has called us up at Wichita and said that they want to do some pattern work. So put in 123 off Bravo, Cessna 172 pattern work, and if he's got a squawk code, we'll just say it's 0103 or something to that effect. Now in the second line, we'll say we got him doing patterns on one left because that's just what we need from him. One left. Now to track operations on paper half strips, you'll put in a check mark whenever they're cleared for an operation. If you want to simulate realism and just add a new check mark for every operation, that's fine. Or if you just want to have one check mark for the operation, then delete it and then add it back whenever you clear an aircraft for the option, that's fine too. Your flight following strips for VFR aircraft, you'll treat the same as a local controller. Just fit them into your sequence wherever necessary. Or just make sure they're in a good order. These guys, especially when they're working within your surface area or they're doing pattern work, especially if there's multiple of them. Let's go and add a few half strips. And what you'll do with these guys is for your sequence, whoever's first should go at the bottom. And then whenever operations happen, just move them around like a little puck board. So whoever's cleared for an operation is always at the bottom. Whoever's last in your sequence is at the top. And have your sequence in order in the middle. Fairly simple to work with, but it just needs to be said to standardize things. So ground control is going to have the same similar responsibilities as the IFR strip handling. Just complete line 1 for the paper strips and assign the runway in line 2 prior to forwarding to local. And for local, arrival strips should be sequenced in the order in which they will arrive, and arrival strips may be forwarded to ground control upon clearing the runway and contacting ground if required. And make sure you keep your VFR strips updated at all time. Before we push this up to the website, we're going to make sure to include a footnote here about the flight following strip marking just to make this more clear, because line 1 and 2 is talking about the paper strips. Your responsibilities with these strips is going to be the same as your IFR strips. But that about concludes the majority of the changes and information that you'll need for the new flight strip policy. This is mandatory to be read prior to your next controlling session, and should make ZKC much more standardized and run much more smoothly whenever it comes to local control operations. Happy controlling.